אוקיי. אנחנו מוכנים? כן, אז אנחנו, קודם כל שלום לכולם, ברוכים הבאים. אנחנו נתחיל את המפגש היום בכינון המוטיבציה, בבקשת מקלט ובודיצ'יטה. לאחר מכן אנחנו גם...
glaube, sagt, dass also zunächst Zuflucht und dann Bodhicitta, also taking refuge in genuine bodhicitta, and that is followed by the four immeasurables. And after that, there will be the Heart Sutra that we recited. Oh, sorry.
The four immeasurables, we recite the Heart Sutra, and then we will make the mandala offering as a token for requesting the teachings. בבודה, בדרמה, בקהילה העילאית, אבקש מקלט עד להערה.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger, that hold some close and others distant. And now there's the Heart Sutra. Homage to the exalted three jewels. Thus have I heard at one time. The Blessed One was dwelling in Jashpriya on Vultured Mountains, together with a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One is absorbed in the concentration of the countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. At that very time, the superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, was looking perfectly at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, perfectly looking at the emptiness of inherent existence of the five aggregates also. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said to the superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, how should a child of the lineage train who wishes to engage in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, replied to the Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage wishes to engage in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should perfectly look like this. Subsequently, looking perfectly and correctly at the emptiness of inherent existence of the five aggregates also. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are empty without characteristics, that is, they are not produced and do not cease. They have no defilement and no separation from defilement. They have no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there's no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness. There's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no object of touch, no mental phenomenon. There's no eye element and so forth, up to no mind element, up to no element of mental consciousness. There's no ignorance and no cessation of ignorance and so forth, up to no aging and death and no cessation of aging and death. Likewise, there's no suffering, no origin, no cessation and no path, no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there's no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom, and because their minds have no obstructions, they have no fear. Passing utterly beyond error, they attain the final state beyond sorrow. All the Buddhas who reside in the three times by relying upon the perfection of wisdom become manifest and complete Buddhas in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the equal to the unequaled mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering since it is not false, should be known as the truth. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Shariputra, this is how Bodhisattva, a great being, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that concentration and said to the superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, well said, O child of the lineage, so it is. The profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced exactly as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra, the superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, and the entire assembly, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, demigods, Gandharvas, and others, were filled with admiration and highly praised for having spoken by the Blessed One. So ends the noble discourse on the essence of the wisdom gone beyond.
ושיקחו את שאמר הבגבן. אנחנו עכשיו נעבור לבקשת המקלט, סליחה, להגשת המנדלה.
Follows the mandala.
בקשת השיעורים רינפוצ'ה.
Extensive mandala offering. Om adamantine ground, Ahom, mighty golden ground, Om adamantine circumference, Ahom. Outside is encircled by the circumferential wall, in the center of which are Sumeru, king of mountains, the eastern continent Vidya, the southern Jambudvipa, the western Godania, the northern Kuru, Dea and Vidya, Kamara and Aparakamara, Shata and Uttara Manchin, Kuru and Kalvara. In the four continents are the precious mountain, the wish-granting tree, the wish-fulfilling cow, the unplowed harvest, the precious wheel, the precious jewel, the precious queen, the precious minister, the precious elephant, the precious horse, the precious general, the pot of great treasure, lady of grace, lady of garlands, lady of song, lady of dance, lady of flowers, lady of incense, lady of lamps, lady of perfume, the sun, the moon, the precious parasol, the banner of victory in all quarters, in the center the most perfect riches of gods and human beings, with nothing missing, pure and delightful. To my glorious, holy, and most kind root guru and lineage gurus, and in particular to Guru Vajrasattva's deity host, I shall offer these as a Buddha field. Please accept them with compassion for the sake of migrating beings. Having accepted them to me and all migrating mother beings as far as the limits of space out of your great compassion, please grant your inspiration. This ground, anointed with perfumes, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Mera, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land.
Joku nam da shin la che pa sho je tsun lama dam pa ke nam gi che ku kala
Vigila, can you hear me?
Mabdu soirang guru rana mandala kamniyatayami.
다 상계 조선 다기던 사스. 다 달래달래야 패대베. 다 달람나는 센데냐 참말로야. 이게 참리슈스. 아니 몽보지는 아래 모시버샤스. 양조 진지에부터 가보셔라 총선스. 먼저 디바라디 COVID-19 아니 파주 로마토지기 로징이지 침바르와스. 아니 단에 무스데 용토버지다. and the
So Rinpoche says that first of all, he'd like to welcome everyone here, well, everyone who's actually present in the place where Rinpoche is right now, as well as everyone online. And Rinpoche says he knows many, there are many familiar faces that he recognizes from previous visits. And so he's very happy to see everyone, to be able to meet everyone again. So for 2 years, 1 or 2 years, it was not possible to travel, he couldn't come, but this time being able to come again after 1 or 2 years, not being able to travel, being able to return to Israel and be here with you, he's very happy. So the internet is cutting out.
ngaranzu chug lobchen chugu yore tinde indu nganzu delia anzom debegi kamalo nya ngara inare ani kyananzu senken so inare manzo nimanga tu ti ringtelia ani chusdo yakbochi che sambe trine endusche chaba yakbochi da nyamle yakbochi talent tu di chocholia en tu yakbochi tang sambachi en marangene samtre tangi kyananzu mene ne kombote de sheroches.
Sorry, the internet connection is not very good, so I missed the beginning. Anyways, Rinpoche is saying, well, Rinpoche will continue with the teachings. Last year, Rinpoche gave some introductory teachings on the subject. And this year, Rinpoche will teach the text for 5 or 6 days. And it's important that in terms of you listening to the teachings, generate the right kind of motivation. So to turn the Dharma into Dharma in the sense that, well, to be determined to practice well. I mean, Rinpoche will teach as well as he can, and you should listen as well as you can and put into practice whatever you've heard, and in that way have the right kind of motivation for these kind of teachings. So Rinpoche will do that, and you should do this too. Longer here. Internet connection is not good.
Lorim chagi yore. Jugu ta lojama chagi na kanen jil lorim sumbat chene en chaje lobchen di shu zoya che o tus chen ngazo chashi chuko sha yore o tinza talung anzo lobchen di chajen korchi shares. Kiranzo kingrwas.
And so the topic, as you're aware, is the topic of Mahamudra, in English, the Great Seal, the teachings on Mahamudra, the Great Seal. And this is already the 2nd year. So depending on how far we get this year, well, maybe there'll be another year, maybe there'll be a 3rd year of teachings. So let's see what happens. But anyway, that's the plan. The plan is to continue with the teachings that Rinpoche started last year. And the topic is, as mentioned earlier, it's the Great Seal of Mahamudra.
No.
O tindichi duwas tinala sebu koyores o kobe shisungi entringa mutu chechochis.
So with regard to the reason for why Rinpoche chose this particular topic, well, actually there's a transcript of what Rinpoche taught last year, and you can actually read about Rinpoche's reasons why he's teaching this particular topic. But even though Rinpoche has mentioned it last year and it has been written down, it can be read in the transcript, Rinpoche would still like to talk about it again. So once again, Jesus would allow me to talk about this again, give you the reason for that.
Docho ton reshe gayachi, majo ton reshe gayachi, ni yungduas, tan docho ton reshe gabaina, loni donga je kon, tangi chishe shegi das, loni donga je kon.
Again.
Amayas, you and should that namju dembe puji and kongi and ta ngone thane gi ngara jundeba digi chida mindeba dunghe imbe chane ndeba digi tumo mayimba ane dutewa ge tabla an konlo nishtagu badu ane gehanna le shuje ane tine digin dangi meba ji sine an kon chodo phene ludu kaje ze an doji dalia ane nyamlen tarchimba nyamnyong tarchimbe an tine luju na nambe sikchena saje sigre ngone 지단 로다제는 냠냠 털진지 중제 도스 집에 로주 지르바스 간다 미중 지르바스
I can only guess what Rinpoche said. So Rinpoche, well, in general, he said that with regard to Mahamudra, there are two types of Mahamudra. There is the sutric kind of Mahamudra, as well as the tantric type of Mahamudra. And in particular, talking about this sutric type of Mahamudra, well, in general, so Rinpoche says he'll just talk about it in general. 2,500 years ago, the Buddha was born in India to his mother and his father, who was a king, and he lived in great luxury with, with his companions. However, he did encounter suffering when he ventured outside of the palace, where he was very much protected from the reality of life. Well, he ventured outside the palace and encountered suffering in the form of a sick person, in the form of an old person, and so forth. So encountering the different types of suffering. And so therefore, the wish developed, he generated the wish to overcome suffering, to find a solution to suffering. It kept him wondering, what can you do? So having seen suffering, he started to wonder, what can I do to find a solution to suffering? And so therefore he left the palace. For that reason, he left the palace at the age of 29. It was the life of a king, the life of a prince was no longer enough for him. So he left the palace and underwent first great ascetic practices, or undertook great ascetic practices, until he came to Bodh where he attained, well, in English you would say, or ordinarily would talk about him attaining enlightenment, but actually he perfected his practice, in a sense, like, well, if you want to put it the exact way, he perfected meditation, he perfected his practice. And in that way, you could compare it. In the West, it's like someone who's reached the highest level of education, for instance. It would be like someone who's a professor. So it's like becoming a professor.
민남제 젠지기 개 투모 많이 받지 아니 배트 갑티도 꾸일라 마타바게 아니 시제연 네 캐버라 왔지 캠바 어떤지 지리야 캠바 타르침바 지라 고고야지 레스 단단한지 단다라 너마타베 셰라니 못이 딱 콩송바 지르 바스 다 차첸 세디 조조조디 노팅이지 개별 갑리야 최남 군기랑시 차자체에서는 최남기 내루 최남기 인루 최남기 땅 뭐여기 내당 탈두디 가리임바디 못잡았다 누루네시베 차자청보 사지 디스 여러바스 근데 인도 딱갑디도 산제 코랑기 자지 개 탈침베 토네 랑도기 미지기 시야샤바지기 예수당네 마숭보마임바 랑도기 토네 아니 사무텐중기 데코나니스 좀 된데 사모사지 나와사지 니도아 시라니부 시텔라 사모사야디기 네루티체 나와사야디기 텐중디체
Sorry.
산제 라니기 로두까지를 소베 토네 냠뇽 캐버진 충베 토네 마 숭샤바티기 아니 셴다 민라지기 다 람데 캐버와지 타바트 쳐와지 동발라나메바지 독스체네 아니 충버레스네 산제기 캐주지 시하고 중앙이나야 차제 전부 니토네 다 산제기 캐주 등기여레스
לא יודע, תן
So I'm not sure. I didn't hear everything, but I'll try to translate what I heard. So anyway, the Buddha attained what is called Buddhahood or enlightenment, that highest state of knowledge, in the sense that anything that can be known, he got to realize, he got to understand. So he developed in particular the qualities of knowledge. We attained the kind of final knowledge, understanding how phenomena really exist. So as we recited in the Heart Sutra previously, it becomes obvious from what it says in the Heart Sutra that any kind of knowledge, anything that can be understood in terms of its ultimate and conventional nature, all that the Buddha has realized. So when we talk about Mahamudra here, actually, well, Mahamudra, it is mentioned in the King of Concentration Sutra. In that particular sutra, it says the sphere of reality of phenomena, the ultimate nature of phenomena, that is Mahamudra, that is the Great Seal. Therefore, the Buddha has attained these greatest qualities, these greatest qualities of knowledge, understanding how phenomena really exist. So he himself realized them through his own power, in the sense he didn't realize them because someone told him about it, to tell him about the ultimate nature of phenomena, but rather he himself, through his own experience, through his own realization, came to understand the final nature of all phenomena. Now, when we talk about the final nature of all phenomena, it's got two aspects. One aspect is the deep, the profound aspect, that is the lack of inherent existence of phenomena. And then there are the appearances of phenomena. Therefore, you've got the appearance and you've got the profound aspect of phenomena. The appearances refer to dependent arising, while the profound aspect of phenomena refers to their ultimate nature, to their lack of inherent existence. And Rinpoche didn't hear Rinpoche for a while. But anyway, so Rinpoche then, once could hear him again, he said, therefore, the Buddha has attained special knowledge when it comes to how phenomena really exist, when it comes to what path to follow in order to reach the same state that the Buddha has reached. This is why we say the Buddha is unsurpassable. And what he is taught in terms of the ultimate nature, the reality of phenomena, so their ultimate nature, dependent arising, and so forth, well, that's what we call the nature of phenomena, as said earlier in the Sutra of the King of Concentration, that is Mahamudra.
콜로 타마스네 상게 준데데 그 구제 디나래야 추기 콜로를 뭐 숨을 거와 어떤데지기 남샤지 노드곤데 갑라이 숭고요래 숭고원주 제비 갑라이 숭고요래 딘데지기 콜로를 뭐 숨을 거왜 끼네 아니 개 최슈지다 자 최슈지디 가르쳐 버렸으나 юм샤르기 바로도 침 봤으네 콜로 바르바티 딱개 땡기네 아니 콜로 바바티 콜로 통단이네자 하장 개체와 이메 유생 간데르스나 상게 라니기 숭베qabla 있나야 니기 티 니기 샴버 제네스 상게 준데라 갑티디 기루몽고 요레티 Rajgiri, Chago Pumburia, Shijing do Sumba Kala, Sanje Korangi Sunjanase, Tidi Sanje Korang Dusche, the Savak Zigi in a re, Karitsigi in a, and Dusche Tidi Ranik Zibanzene, and Tigan Shune, and Chetaya. Karesna, Kan Sunju Cheti, that Georgia Subshijida, and Yache Shijik, or Kolotondani, Georgia, Nimbo Tilia, Dugu, Devachi. 콜 바바들 두기요 되버지 딘데인 배차네 아니 간팅규 저자디 하장 사부지 예배 당팅 사부 예배 교전도 전에 상계라니 기가 간팅규 최들이야 구셔기 토네 니기 샤마 잡아 이스네 간다를 차제 정부디 저자 니기 샴브르즈스 다 소소 데세티 소소 찍바 어딜리아 다 니기 샴사기 벽에데 인규 소소 데세티디 소소 라니기 찍제 엔티갈 쇼네 엔 콜바바 숨브레스 기두 몽보여 데 기두 드 찍바 멤버레 산제 라니기 찍어 딜 규탄요
So Rinpoche said, well, with regard to the teachings that Rinpoche is giving here as well, those are the teachings of the Mahayana, or the universal vehicle. And the universal vehicle, the teachings of the universal vehicle, they're usually divided into what are called the three wheels. The first wheel, the second wheel, and the third wheel. Those are described, for instance, in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, and there are other sutras that present those three wheels and present the content of these different teachings. But of all these teachings, so when summarizing the teachings, when organizing them, organizing them into those three wheels, the most precious of all these teachings are the teachings of the Mother Sutras, as they are called, or the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras. Those are said to be the most important teachings of the different teachings the Buddha gave, and they are part of the second wheel. So the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras were taught as part of the second turning of the wheel. Those are said to be most important, and it was at Rajgriya in India, this place called Vulture Peaks Mountain, where a throne was set up. A throne was set up on which the Buddha basically sat while he gave these teachings on the Perfectional Wisdom Sutra. So these extremely profound, these were the profoundest type of teachings at the same time as the most far-reaching kind of, most extensive kind of teachings. So he taught the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras at Rajgriya, the most profound and the most far-reaching teachings, as part of the second turning of the wheel. And when it comes to this throne, and this is the part I couldn't hear, when it comes to the throne, it wasn't set up by the disciples. It wasn't that the disciples set up or prepared a throne, but rather the Buddha himself prepared the throne, and therefore there's a significance to that. There's a reason for why the Buddha set up his own throne on which he then sat, or his own seat on which he sat. So that I didn't hear everything.
שהוא לימד את סוטרות האם, סוטרות של שלמות החוכמה. בהם, כמו שאמרנו, גם לימד את המהמודרה, אבל לפי נקודת המבט של מסורת הסוטרה, המשמעות של המהמודרה זה ריקות.
캐나초 딩두기 누쪽신 로종 난제 차론 총대베 아니 미치 임베차네 대단데 더 깨제 셰베이나스 아니 겨울음지기 아니 숭주살로 숭송스 야가 룽베 나라야 체리 총두지 초베 갑라 아니 야가기 체리 개제 폴라지 갑디두 다 폴라지 힘바레 단다도 페이지 요사마레 통사 인사레 라자 라마나스인지 아니 콩 체리 총두 디나라야 아니 콩 렉저시에제 아니 콩 렉저시에 되나라야 콘돔 피식스 더 티오리
Get anything. Send a message to the technical team. So all I heard was, this is a nice story that I wanted to I only heard. So the last thing Rinpoche said was, well, this was the story I wanted to share with you. This is not just told, it's not just a story. This is really what happened. And it's strongly connected to our current age, to our present time. There's a strong connection between the story Rinpoche told and our present situation. Unfortunately, I don't know what it was, but maybe it'll become clear.
הדלאי למה דרך אגב, שעסק בארגון מפגשים בדיאלוג בין בודהיזם למדע. ואחד המפגשים הדלאי למה ארגן תחת חסותו, אחד מהאנשים שהשתתפו בהם היה כבר
So actually, sorry, the very beginning, Rinpoche talked about this meeting, I forgot to mention that. So there was a meeting between His Holiness and some scientists. They got together in India, someplace at some time. They got together, and there was a scientist, an Indian scientist, a very famous scientist called Raja Ramana, and he gave a lecture on quantum physics. So this is the story of Rinpoche. This is what Rinpoche talked about. So if I remember correctly, I think His Holiness has mentioned this during a couple of times during the teachings, that this person, Raja Ramana, when he gave his talk, he says that quantum physics is relatively new in the West, but in India it has existed for a long time, since thousands of years. So this is not a new knowledge for Indians. This is an ancient knowledge that is being rediscovered, as far as I remember this story. So I think this is what Rinpoche was saying, that this is a knowledge that is discovered in the West nowadays. However, in India, it has existed for a long time.
אפשר לראות אפילו הסבר כזה, אפילו ההבנה הזאת כבר הייתה קיימת לפני 2000 שנה ויותר. למרות שאומר שהוא מעלה את האנקדוטה הזאת, כי קודם כל זה נחמד עבורנו לדעת לדעת או לשמוע על
So anyway, I think the Hebrew translators was saying it's not just an anecdote, this is really in accordance with reality.
לא רק טקסטים דתיים מקוננים או...
So I've just heard Nagarjuna, so probably Rinpoche talked about the fact that these quantum physics, this ancient quantum physics, that was also set forth by Nagarjuna, right? These great Indian masters.
이게 냠랜디 하장게 개침부치 차기에 돼봐 간데레스 바이나 만조 단달이야 누구 다녀디 수레 강에 땡에디 수레 강에 땡에디 남병 냠레마 지금 거네 깨제 시아베나 강에 땡에디 칠로를 주고 주야 마이마 강에 땡에디 나로를 주고 주야 나로를 주고 주베 갑라 양매나 란제버 준비 진진 양매나 다도 좀 당진 니기 토네 아니 란초라 차 현주 디치기여다 봐. 다와나 디 아니 매버 영화 쇼스네 몰람 잡네 코 매버 차 두고 매다 봐. 다와나 코 매버 제약 탑라 가르스나 코로 추바 임바. 디무딘지 생에데 로 친줄로 임바. 콜라 잡대 매다 봐. 코르 치더 송원나시 세바이나 마세두 줘야지 임다 봐. 콜 푹자 매더니 와나 그 도초 나 매버사지 똥바 니사지 디단당 안절 곰디 매자 테스트 고각보로지다 루유로 마숑 대대버지 예베 있나야 콜라 림베르메 곰바체나 곰바 세루 줘야 되버지 엉원에 다네 이 타르 베지 세메라면 녀바니 얘기해야 되버지 타르 무슨로 또 얘기해야 되버지 틴데지기 토네 아니 지 때문 차당이 자와 때문 된지 생긴티 라르 미케베 최전도 동반이게 따왕예베 토네 시기해야 되버지 근데 인도 다 남배 최바 지금 뭐네 다 누구다냐 나도 좀 당진에 와서 소고기나 동반이게 냠래 과나와도 델리 셴벨랑과 신다지기 당진 봉토다 매대버지기 개가치 뭐지 와나 텐다버지기 당진 빵네 아니 사자 가발리 그랬으나 타르바사지 텐데지기 둥에 댄세베 타르바사지 토베야지 디 룽바 신다지를 파준 로 깨져 멤버체 루보 대가랑 그 토네 곰게 냠내 제베 토네 니마치 동반이기 따베 톱기 뇨모 라르 미게베 최전도 남 제베체 아니 루보 디가랑 게 토네 타바 톱사지 나나 샤리푸트라 몽골리아나 두조강가 루보 디가랑 게 토네 다좀 아라하티스게데 톱데고 왔다 두조 벨샤네 토야야 되버지 다원에 되게 쳐버려 bes나 되게 초금해 봐 디 간들이야 산제기 공방 생계지 리바니 방배 산제기 공방 생계지 톱고 요바이나 라제버 준비 진진이 년부터라 인년제 전부 잡을게 장주그 쌤 생계지 동이 닝제 닝부제 생계지 장주그 쌤게 조체배 동이 또배 이시 동이 또배 이시기 조체배 장주그 쌤 등이 찍로스 찍송배 토네 다 나진다와이나 제비직 남갈 필드 쇼바니 고와나시 다 탑 장주그 쌤 셰르 동이 또배 이시 딩잉이 숭리지가 토네 아니 라메 조버 상기 고마 톱사지 딘데지 인도 차자체 사디 지단도님도 이시 대점도 마세베 오다 동니 닌제님 부제 탑시 숭리기 냠내지라 아니 고고야 페지레 성규스 작첸 사디 노초네 고야디
Now, this is something well, nowadays, in the West in particular, science is very popular. But Buddhism and science, they do not contradict each other. Those two actually support each other. So the scientific understanding and the Buddhist understanding, they are in harmony with each other. There's no contradiction between them. But actually, it's important here that we apply the Dharma, apply Buddhism, in the sense that it's important to first understand what is it that tortures us? What is it that is responsible for all our trouble? To reflect on that, to analyze what is it? So naturally, these internal turmoils, this misery that we often go through, well, naturally, there's a sense that it's someone else outside of ourselves, but we shouldn't point at other people, at other situations, and feel that they're mainly to blame for all our problems. In actuality, it's important to understand that in actuality, what it is that causes all our problems, all our difficulties, it's twofold. It's our self-centeredness, and it's cause grasping at true existence. So this grasping at a self, grasping at true existence and self-centeredness, those two are really responsible for all our problems. And so with regard to those two, well, having, first of all, this misperception of reality, grasping at a self, grasping at a true existence, that then giving rise to, that then gives rise to self-centeredness. And then these two, in turn, they give rise to, for instance, being attached to what is close to us and being averse or having aversion towards that which is different from us and so forth. In that way, therefore, it's important to understand that these two have to be removed. That's what we need to remove, those two states of mind, self-centeredness and self-grasping. But by praying, just merely by praying, reciting prayers, they won't disappear on their own. Instead, it's important for us to understand that they're mistaken. Their objects do not exist. The object of the self-grasping mind, the object of the self-centered mind, it doesn't exist. It has no support in reality. It has no foundation in reality. And when we analyze that which the mind is holding on to, those two minds, I mean, the self-centered attitude or self-centeredness, as well as the self-grasping mind, if we analyze what are their objects, well, this object, when we look for the object, it'll, instead of becoming clearer and clearer, it starts to disappear. We won't be able to find it. Instead, in order to remove these two types of minds that causes so much trouble, we need to understand the opposite of what they perceive. What is the opposite of what these two minds hold on to? The opposite is selflessness or emptiness. Now, when you first hear about this, emptiness, selflessness, they're difficult to understand, but just because we're not familiar with them. But as we grow more familiar, as we habituate with the understanding of those two, how selflessness, emptiness, it'll become clearer and clearer. And at the very end, if we continue to reflect on it, to meditate on it, we'll be able to gain a clear experience of selflessness, of emptiness. So in that way, we need to understand how on the basis of emptiness, on the basis of selflessness, emptiness, we can eliminate our misperception of reality. That's the only path. So to eliminate self-grasping, the self-grasping ignorant mind, we need to realize emptiness. That's important to understand. There's no other way. And once we realize emptiness, are we going to go to a different place? Well, we're going to reach liberation. We'll reach liberation, but that is not a different place per se. It's not really a different country, for instance. Instead, exactly where you are right now, right here and right now, you meditate on the Dharma, you become more familiar, in particular with emptiness, until you directly experience it. And then one day you'll be able to experience emptiness directly. And based on that, you start to eliminate afflictive emotions. That's how Shariputra did it. That's how Moggallana, the Buddha's close disciples, have done it. And they eventually attained the state of an arhat, of a foe destroyer. However, that is not enough. Here we're talking about the Mahayana, or the universal vehicle. So the goal here is not just self-liberation, but the goal is to eliminate the two obscurations, the obscurations to Buddhahood. Those need to be eliminated. And just realizing emptiness is not enough. Just realizing selflessness, that's not sufficient. We need to combine our understanding of emptiness, the realization of emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness, with bodhicitta, the root of which is great compassion. So out of great compassion arises bodhicitta, and that kind of mind is now conjoined with the wisdom realizing emptiness. Conjoined in the sense that one assists the other. Bodhicitta, which is rooted in great compassion, assists the wisdom realizing emptiness, and the wisdom realizing emptiness assists bodhicitta that is rooted in great compassion. So they're like two wings. It's like a bird. A bird can't fly unless it uses both wings. So similarly, we cannot attain enlightenment unless we use the two wings of bodhicitta that is rooted in great compassion and the wisdom understanding emptiness. So those two need to be combined. It's not sufficient just to have the mind realizing emptiness or the wisdom realizing emptiness. We need both aspects. And therefore it is said that these two, both aspects together, they are what are called the Great Seal. In the sense that, well, it's not just a seal, it is called the Great Seal. Why is it called the Great Seal? Well, because it refers to this combination, the combination of method in this case being, for instance, bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment that is rooted in great compassion, as well as wisdom. And wisdom here being the wisdom realizing emptiness. Therefore, we're talking about not just a seal, so Mahamudra, mudra being translated as seal, but here we're talking about Mahamudra, Maha being great. So the Great Seal is a combination of those two, or not just a combination, but the union of those two. Method, which is bodhicitta rooted in great compassion, and wisdom, which is the wisdom realizing emptiness. So it's only by way of those two, by way of this union, the Great Seal, or this union of the two aspects, that we can eliminate the true obscurations and eventually attain the enlightened state of the Buddha.
נוכל להפוך להיות בודה, בודה שלם שנפטר או שסילק את שני המערפלים האלה. אז כשאנחנו חושבים על מהמודרה, המילה עצמה, מהמודרה, מתחילה במאה, והמשמעות של מאה זה גדול, החותם הגדול בעברית, the great seal או מהמודרה. אז רימפוצ'ה אומר שחושבים על זה מנקודת המבט של מסורת הסוטרה. מה שגדול פה זה השילוב של החוכמה ביחד עם השיטה. כמו אנחנו לפעמים מדברים על שילוב של חוכמה ושיטה כשני כנפיים של ציפור, בעזרתן הציפור יכולה להמריא ולעוף בשמיים. אז אנחנו רוצים לפתח את הצד של החוכמה ואת הצד של השיטה, והצד של השיטה הוא הצד של הבודיצ'יטה, ששורשה הוא החמלה הגדולה. אז כשאנחנו חושבים על מהמודרה, ואמרנו קודם שהמשמעות של המהמודרה אפשר לומר שהיא הריקות, לפי המהמודרה של הסוטרה, המשמעות שאנחנו מגיעים אליה בסוף זה הריקות, אבל כשחושבים על המונח עצמו שמתחיל במה הגדול, זה לא רק ריקות, זה לא רק הצד של החוכמה, אלא זה מה או גדול, כי הוא בעצם מעורב גם עם השיטה שמשלבת בודיצ'יטה, שמבוססת על חמלה.
나래기 생기 차고 돈에 시기 여러 땅에 야지야타 마티 레스텔라고 메데 돌람 그 돈에 시아바이나 전부 송두 죽사야기 작체에 사든 군지라시 차자체스 담말 그저 만두도 딘데지기 군라 차바 군지라시 차자체 노초네지 용구 여바이나 차자체스야디 장주sem다 동반이 송두 죽버지기 딘데 돌 누구 유지레스 다가라 임버레 나딘데 섬기요 유전 타기 시작 다가라래 다 딘데지 임바이나 된라와티 병고 파벌루두기 아니 юм시라기 바로도 침be 공부나 신지가 우마른제 틈에 qab라야 장주sem고 꼬르숭고 동반이고 꼬르숭고도 다 조지반데 아디샤기 장주람지 도메 qab라이나야 아니 장주sem고 꼬르숭고도 동반이고 랑동 꼬르숭고도 두수 개침보 임베 돈에 숭고도 벼 간쟁이 종을 차샤바이나 상아 닝메 초라이나 군산라메 샬룽사야기 달람리미냐 탄다 캐나즈데 좀바르부지를 차샤나 리메 냠네 칭인지기 이다 다투지기 돈에 로고 알바스 닝메 쳐야 냠네체 사제 쳐야 냠네체 까규비 쳐야 냠네체 기루 쳐야 냠네체 창말로리야 냠네 도나체 등이 지르바스 근데 지금 거는 시아바이나 상한님의 죄를 자샤면은 군산라메 샬룽사야 되기 터두고 밥사대 장주 있습니다. 동만이기 따위냐면 돌아 잔네 로고야지 레데도와 하스레스나 산제기 고모터베 탑지 레도와스 나 거규비 최기 토몰람장기 냠네지 토네 셰인도 다부 타르겐스기 다부 타르겐사야 돼야 리그고네 야티베고네 타르 밥사대 장주 있습니다. 동만이기 냠네기 토네 아니 야외 추구 담바다 수구 담바 두야지 토라 밥이야 다가 밥고도 왔어. 다 리우 겐덴발 차샤바 있나네. 아니 람림 체중 두서 간가 밥사때와 데려 왔어. 아니 юм시라기 바로도 지금 공부차기 여러 왔어. 근데 인도 달래 차체해야 돼. 놀람게 온도 집에 차체해야 돼. 나라 아니 밥사때와 가르 밥알았으나 동반이다. 아니 동반이기 냠내다. 아니 잔주급성이 냠내 니보티 숭리기 털라. 아니 냠술래야 지금 털라 숭기에 대봐 지금 나체는 다가래서 뭐 돌람 그 털라 돌람 건시나
עכשיו הצגה עושה ככה,
Rinpoche says, well, this is Rinpoche's personal opinion. He says he's not sure about it, but actually, as it is said that here the greatness of the Great Seal refers to the union, and that everything is in the nature of this Great Seal. So therefore, the Great Seal, or Mahamudra as it's called, so talking about it from the point of view of being a union of two aspects, and that which pervades all phenomena in that sense, well, Rinpoche says he believes, therefore, the greatness here refers to, or it's called great, it's called great because it refers to those two aspects, as Rinpoche explained earlier. So bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness. And the reasons being, as Rinpoche mentioned earlier, that those two aspects are needed in order to eliminate the two obscurations and attain the enlightened state of a Buddha. And so therefore, Nagarjuna, for instance, Nagarjuna commenting on the Mother Sutras, on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, in his different commentaries, such as the Precious Garland. In the Precious Garland, for instance, he mentions not only emptiness, not only does he talk of emptiness, not only does he explain emptiness, but he also explains bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. He sets forth both. He doesn't just talk of one of them, but he mentions them in union. Likewise, great Dipankara Atisha, he also talked about in his in his great lamrim, or the lamp of the stages of the path to enlightenment. In there, he also speaks of both the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, as well as the wisdom realizing emptiness. And in the same way, in the different traditions, the Buddhist, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So the great Indian masters talked about those two, and also the Tibetan masters, starting with the Nyingma tradition, for instance. So in the Nyingma tradition, you have, for instance, the text called Words of My Perfect Teacher. And there, the author talks about, well, bodhicitta and the mind realizing emptiness. Similarly, in the non-sectarian movement, and so Rinpoche said, there's some of you here who've got an interest in that, in the non-sectarian movement. And again, as part of the teachings that are part of the non-sectarian teachings, again, the union of those two are set forth. And then you have the Sakya tradition, you have the Kagyu tradition, you have the different types of traditions. So, for instance, well, when you talk about these other traditions, Nyingma, Sakya, and Kagyu, well, they do very clearly set forth bodhicitta and wisdom as those two being the means to attaining enlightenment. And in the Kagyu tradition, for instance, the text Wuthagen, so the kind of the ornament of purity, this Lamrim text, as it's called. So this particular text also, in exactly the same way as the other texts mentioned before, set forth bodhicitta, explain bodhicitta and the mind of enlightenment, as well as the wisdom realizing emptiness. And then talking about the fourth tradition, the fourth Buddhist tradition, or Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Gelug tradition. Well, in there you have the teachings of the Lamrim, of course, the treatises on the stages of the path to enlightenment. And again, in there, what is set forth are bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness. So in other words, the main message, if you like, the essence of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, that which they contain, all that is set forth by these different texts, which is why the Mahamudra teachings, therefore, are taught in all the different traditions. Well, they've been taught in India in the way described by Nagarjuna, Atisha, and so forth, as well as by the great Tibetan masters of the different traditions. So all of them taught what is called the Great Seal, by way of teaching this union of bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness.
שוב, החותם הגדול, להביא דרך התרגול לאיחוד בין השיטה, שיבודיצ'יטה, להשקפת הריקות.
독초 찍네 셰베이나. 다 차제 전부 써야 돼. 나다 드버지래. 다 돌람네 셰베 장주스는 동반이 시라케 전부자 아이나. 사지기 터네 장주스는 동반이기 냠네 되게디. 도나매베체네 차제 전부지 사지기 또고께 사지데 자와니네 매데버지. 통문 남정 뭔도 교와나 특복 사지 통문 남정 뭔도 송아지기. 아니 도지 틀주 특복군주 초주 도지 틀주 거야지. 차기 여러 텐데 인도 통문 남자 장주고 있습니다. 동반이 생겐티 고 노초네 숨기 여러디 나게 냠랭게 갑라 있느냐. 대실샤베 토네 아니 디강리야 아니 나게 통문 마임베게 맹아 너메 잡네. 아니 안 로고야지 레마도 지기 놀람기 슝네 셰샤베게 탑시기 냠네 어티 아니 도나 마제베체제 딘 놀람기 레스네 난중르 샤네 디유 샤네 나게 토네 차자치무 또버께서야지 매데베지 어틴데지 인도 냐바첸도 단단 놀람네 셰베기 차자천비기 전부 숨도 주고 써야 돼. 다 탑시니 탑장 주고 쓴다. 셰라 동반이 숨도 주고 지글 거기 옆에나 등냐바첸도 아니 냠랭기 쪼려야 샤고야지 어딘데지레스 어디 캐나즈 캔고야지레스.
אז אמרנו שיש את המהמודרה על פי...
Now, talking about the opposite case, well, feeling that only Mahamudra from the tantric point of view, that is what is important. The sutric kind of Mahamudra, well, that is not important. Some people may feel that way, but that is completely mistaken to feel that the sutric Mahamudra is not important, that it's not essential in terms of our practice. Why? Because the sutric aspect of Mahamudra, so bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, they are the foundation. They are the foundation of any kind of tantric practice. They're extremely important. So Mahamudra is important. However, important in the sense that as a basis, we need the sutric Mahamudra. And then based on that, having the foundation of the sutric Mahayana, once we've established that, then on top of that, or based on that, we can then start to practice Tantra, and then engage in the tantric practices. Because it's clearly said, it's clearly explained time and again that unless we follow the common path, which is the sutric path, we cannot practice the Vajra path, as it's called, or the resultant path of secret mantra. And what does that mean? Well, in order to be able to effectively practice Tantra, we need bodhicitta, we need to practice bodhicitta, and we need to practice, or we need to develop the wisdom realizing emptiness. And those are explained most extensively in the sutric system. It's on that basis. Once we've established that, once we've practiced those, once we have a strong basis on sutric Mahamudra, then Tantra can be added. But there are some who may not be interested in the sutric Mahamudra. They want to go right there. They're only interested in the tantric aspect and the tantric Mahamudra. However, if that's the case, if you ignore the sutric Mahamudra, if you ignore the sutric foundation, then you cannot practice Tantra. It's not okay it's not effective in any way. It's not effective at all to practice Tantra without having the strong foundation of Sutra. We need, therefore, the Sutric Mahamudra. We need this foundation that is the combination of bodhicitta and wisdom realizing emptiness. That should initially become our main practice. Once we have practiced those two, and we have developed those two minds efficiently, once we've developed this kind of basis, then only then can we start to learn about and practice Tantra. So Rinpoche said this is something he wanted to stress here, that this is important, it's something that you need to know.
Tindechiki dolam ki chaja chambuti ke chambuchi imaina ta thikangla ya ngacho ne shebe chaja chambuti karchene gore singedi ta twarwas ngacho ne shebe ani chaja chambuti ngacho karchene gom gore chakchen zokchen ani uma chambu siksta tindegi tanye chi yedewa sedong sungju sajagi sedong sungju ningma gi zokwa chambu kaju gi chaja chambu ani gendengi da dedong sungju oda tindechiki ani nyamlenti karchene ke chambu sayati ta chwa chambu chire ta ti ke chambu inlu indanda karasana tanden dolam giti shila shabe to ne ani loji chi kyangbo yawai shin no sungsongwas sangge jondende ngomazo san gema tadu sabshi twede wese dumache dujitabu chushi khonye sula tengyang gowa minube mema nagachado bawachasne ane sangge jondende ta chikdu khora ngus siksin tar deshe gyabaina ta tongbanyi gi nyamle sabashiwa twede wese dumache tongbanyi tendechigi nya pe ngondu chebe gone dinge maluba sebe tokbachi ngali keson dinge ma mi shendal shebeina gosa mare tanga negap chigringa cheshigme nga bet embenelia do shugin sajigi ta siksin tinijire was ta teleya ane jango jawai shinobugi ane o ditsikdelo kojudus kandar sangge jomden degi tikba cheju ngada jebegi kuzetela kan sungjugi chedi joja yongzogi shiti 디난데 땡기두스 베나 삽시 사야티기 콜로 당부 깜네 때문에 다음에 된디체 쥐델 사야티기 아니 콜로 파르베 깜네 때문에 아니 시제시발라 파르드 쥐베 디베냠으로 쥐베 책이 다음에 받아 제바 두스체네 쥐델 사야티기 콜로 파르베 조자 두스체 땡기요 체 왜세 누마체 사야티기 아니 유라메 시제자베 노르규베 디시시 번닝부 도에 qabla 유 동반이 차로 따야 매나야 유제 웨셀스 셈기랑시 웨사와 저만 남는 루부와 사지 셈기랑시 웨셀사기 오 디코르티 근데 웨세 누마체 사야데 지다 웨세 누마체 사야데 누마체가 딱바 깨자 많이 버체 웨셀 누마체 사야데 균기 딱바 통마 매바네 제제 상마직 봐도 균투는 누구여도 봐 균기 딱바 딱바 시자 죄바인 사기 두스체제 섭치 떼떼에서 누마체 사야티기 아니 콜로 버다송기 저자 용조 즉 송기 여대봐 다 왜세 누마체 사야티기 아니 타르두께자 셰인두 단데로 락바 디마임바 당원에라는 균투는 로야기 균투년데 로락바 공에 셰바데 마임바 다 신두 차외 셈 신두 차외 왜세 딘데지기 유동반이 녜베 고네 아니 디베냐 부체네 야 산지가 살 두고 여대봐 다티 질 아니 레셰 약슈디 질 나다 디나네 나 라메기 토네 아니 시기 여대바지 다 단다 착체세 족체세 세동 송주세 대동 송주세 두적강가 자와 책민다래 마도 지 돈당어도 왜세게 토네 레셰 약이 여대봐 왜세 유쟁기 왜세게 찾는 레셰 약이 여대봐 유동관 일을 투모만이 매나야 유쟁 시아바티기 안에 차와지기 유동관이 녜베 토네 안에 산지주 공부르다고 탑직 투모만이 말지 여대봐 다 계자 독도지 시아바이나 다기 장주고 셈곰 동반이 곰바 대기 꾸다투 송주 생애지 랩투야 깨자지 답시지 땡투고 메두와스 다 신도 차베 셈지기 유동반이 내신 디 셴베 룽기 아니 야외 꾸지 다 넘버 투바지 누구 여바이나 다 디기 꾸투고 송주 생애지 다 루투야지 누가스 차가쟁지 qab려야 디때 족쟁지 qab려야 디때 대동 송주 qab려야 디때 세동 송주 qab려야 디때 딘데 인두 다 나게 루기 찾아 첨부 생긴데 아니 놀람 디팅도 아니 넘베 잡고야 돼 하장 개첨부 가테 팀매바이나 세제저 바타시타와 방투다 매데버지 다 두스레스 딘데 인자 차chen 생긴도 고미야디 다 경가 첨부 인데버지 드레스 산제기 공부 톱 누구 여바이나 시주 타시타와 방야들라 찾아 첨부 팀 마곰나 장주고 쌤 공부도 동반이 공부 찍고기 시리 타시타고 방투다 매대버지 어떻게 말해
אז כמו שאמרנו, יש את
Now,
המעמודה.
with regard to the Sutric Mahamudra, having explained what Sutric Mahamudra refers to, well, some may actually wonder, if we have the Sutric Mahamudra, and if we practice that, why should we practice the Tantric Mahamudra? So what's the point? Once we've got a good foundation, the Sutric Mahamudra, to actually practice the tantric aspect of Mahamudra? Well, this is an important question, and it's important that it's answered. Well, when we talk about Tantra, tantric practices are different. They have different names, different terms are used to describe tantric practice according to the 4 Tibetan traditions. So, for instance, in the Nyingma tradition, it's described as Dzogchen, or the great completion. Tantra is described as Dzogchen. Then in the Kagyu tradition, it is described as Mahamudra. In the Sakya tradition, the result of the path, or the union of clarity and emptiness, those are stressed in the Sakya tradition. And in the Gelo tradition, you have the emphasis of the union of great bliss and emptiness. Now, different terminology is used here to describe tantric practices, the tantric practices or tantric Mahamudra in that sense. Now, actually, His Holiness the Dalai Lama often gives a quote, a particular quote from a sutra, and in this quote, it says, profound and peaceful, free from fabrications, uncompounded clarity. I found a Dharma that is like a nectar, that is like nectar. But since those who I teach this Dharma will not understand it, I will remain in this forest without saying anything. So there's this very famous quote that literally what it's saying, well, that after the Buddha attained enlightenment, he initially felt that no one was going to understand what he has understood, what he had come to realize, or what he had realized. And therefore, initially, he felt that this is this profound and peaceful Dharma. It's free from fabrications and it's uncompounded clarity. So no one is going to understand this. This is what it literally says. So he said, I'll remain in the forest. However, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he quotes this particular verse, he explains it on the basis of all the teachings of the Buddha, in particular the first line of this verse, which reads, profound and peaceful, free from fabrications, uncompounded clarity. Now, the first two words, profound and peaceful, according to His Holiness' explanation, those refer to the first wheel of Dharma. The first wheel of Dharma is described as being profound and peaceful. Then free from fabrications, that describes the second wheel of Dharma, the wheel of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So they are free from here emptiness that is free from fabrications is taught, and therefore the words free from fabrications describes the second wheel, the second Dharma wheel. And then the last one, which is described as uncompounded clarity, that describes the third wheel of Dharma. So what was taught in the third wheel of Dharma? What was the main content of the third Dharma wheel? Well, among other topics, it stressed very much the mind that realizes emptiness, in the sense that previously during the second turning of the wheel, the object emptiness was extensively explained. But now, what is the mind? What kind of mind realizes emptiness? And so that is explained on the basis of the words uncompounded clarity. I mean, that's expressed by these words, uncompounded clarity, and they describe the mind realizing emptiness. So the mind realizing emptiness, it's uncompounded clarity in the sense that it's clear and knowing. So clarity in the sense it's a clear and knowing mind. And uncompounded here doesn't mean permanent. Here the word uncompounded means that it doesn't change its entity. It remains a clear and knowing mind. It continues as a continuum. It continues on as a mind, as a clear and knowing entity. So this is what realizes. This is the subject, or that which realizes emptiness. That is this mind. So this is how it's explained in the sutric system. For instance, you have quotes such as the nature of the mind is clear light, and the obscurations, they are only adventitious. All the folds are only adventitious. You have these explanations in the sutric system, basically meaning that the mind is clear knowing, and all our folds, all our obscurations are not in the nature of the mind. However, these words uncompounded clarity, they also include the tantric teachings, in that in the third wheel of Dharma, the mind being clear, this nature being clear and knowing is extensively explained. But on top of that, as part of also the third Dharma wheel, you have the tantric teachings. You have the tantric teachings that add to this explanation of the mind being clear and knowing, in the sense that, well, in the sutric aspect of the third wheel, the mind is a coarse kind of mind, a coarse mind such as the sense minds, the different sense consciousnesses, as well as the conceptual mind that arises from the sense consciousnesses. So these types of minds, they're just coarse. They're coarse types of minds, rough types of minds. But based on the tantric teachings, you also have the very subtle minds, such as the subtlest type of mind that is possible, which is the clear light mind. So to manifest the clear light, she says she wants to add something. Oh, no. So it's the subtlest type of mind. The subtlest type of mind that is manifested to realize emptiness. And therefore, we need the tantric system to manifest that very subtle mind. So when we talk about Tantra, there are different classes of Tantra, 4 classes. So the highest class is the highest Yoga Tantra. That's what we need. Therefore, it doesn't matter what tradition you follow. It doesn't matter which Tibetan Buddhist tradition you follow, whether it's Dzogchen or whether it's the union of clarity and emptiness, such as in the Sakya tradition. Okay. So the Hebrew translator also said he needs a little longer to translate. Anyway, so also in the whether you follow these different traditions, whether it's according to the Sakya tradition or according to the it's so Rinpoche saying, am I not repeating what I said last year? This is what I talked about last year, so I'm repeating it this year as well. Doesn't it sound like the same explanation? I'm explaining about it again. So I bring this two together, whatever I said last year and what I say this year, I kind of bring this explanation together. But anyway, whether you follow Dzogchen, whether you follow the union of clarity and empty as it's described in the Sakya tradition, or whether you follow the union of great bliss and emptiness as it's described in the Gelug tradition, the goal is all the same. It is to manifest this clear light mind, that subtlest type of mind, and then utilize that mind to realize emptiness. So in short, if we just follow bodhicitta, well, bodhicitta and the mind realizing emptiness, that kind of union, it is not, it's considered a union, it's considered the highest union in the sutric system, but taking the tantric system into consideration, it's not the real union we're looking for. It's not enough, in other words, because in order to overcome the subtlest kind of obscurations, you need to develop another kind of union. What you need to develop is, well, first generate the subtlest mind, this clear light mind, and utilize it in order to, or use this mind to realize emptiness. And then you take the subtlest wind, the subtlest energy wind that accompanies that subtlest clear light mind, and utilize that, and it's in union. These two are in a union, the mind realizing emptiness, that clear light mind realizing emptiness, and the subtlest wind that is part of it. Those two in a union give rise to a Buddha, in the sense that the mind realizing emptiness gives rise to the mind of the Buddha, while the subtlest winds, they give rise to the body of a Buddha. So in union, the mind and the body of the Buddha are achieved in union, through this union of the clear light mind and the subtlest wind that accompanies it. And that way you have the subtlest type of union, which enables you, when you bring together the subtle clear light mind realizing emptiness and the subtle wind, when you utilize those two in union, you're able to eliminate the subtle obscurations. Without this, you can eliminate certain obscurations if you just practice the sutric system of bodhicitta and the mind realizing emptiness, the coarse mind realizing emptiness, but you won't be able to eliminate, you won't be able to overcome the subtlest obscurations. Therefore, it's important to practice the tantric path, no matter which tradition you follow, since they're all follow that same technique or have the same goal of manifesting the clear light mind, realizing emptiness, together with the subtle wind that manifests together with the subtly clear light mind, and eventually creates the body of a Buddha. Therefore, it's important to understand that we need the basis. We need the basis, the sutric basis of bodhicitta and the course mind realizing emptiness. But then only once we have this basis, then we shouldn't stop there, because we won't be able to attain Buddhahood. We won't be able to attain the enlightened state of a Buddha, since we won't be able to eliminate the subtlest obscurations. Those subtlest obscurations can only be eliminated by way of Tantra and of the different tantric classes. It can only be eliminated by practicing the highest of the 4 classes of Tantra, which is highest yoga Tantra. On that basis, then, once we practice that, once we're able to manifest the subtlest clear light mind together with its winds, we're able to develop this mind to such a degree that it's able to eliminate the subtlest obscurations, the obscurations to Buddhahood. So this is the Tantric Mahamudra. The Sutric Mahamudra is the foundation. Based on that foundation, once we're ready, once we have a strong foundation in the Sutric Mahamudra, we then have to practice, if that's our goal, if our goal is Buddhahood, we then need to practice the Tantric Mahamudra in order to be able to eliminate the subtlest obscurations which keep us, which prevent us from attaining Buddhahood. And that is done through this Tantric Mahamudra, as just explained. So the sutra, I repeat it: profound and peaceful, free from fabrications, and non-compounded clarity. I found a Dharma that is like a nectar. Since those who I teach it will not understand it, I will remain in the forest without speaking about it.
동시 최쟁이 내기 있네야 차라지 용야지 도와스 베너스 뉴기 쪽즈라고 분반라고 가리나지 디란싱이 마두부 때는 배발라 코믹 두스파 때네 동시 최쟁디 숭네 데 에 다든자니 냐바 민두 랑원드 투바 민두 사지 거리 베체바 칸데치기나 고 두스야지 도와스 베테나시 제네 안 도팅인지 개베 갑려야 랑기 듄리야 아니 투바 상기 좀 된데게 꿀미네 아니 신의 공주지야 송고도 왔어. 듣고 질 수쟁기 쳐지 인다봐. 아니 랑 둔텔에 공구여다봐. 근데 인도 곰 대와다 미고 차르 대와지 여대바지 레바스. 다 드네 지나가 갑리야 누르 곰 마임바. 라니하고 곰스 라니하고 세인도 사고 때다랑 오예매지 갑단 둔다 강같이 삼노지 따한제 어때진데 걸 tes tagin dunia tebna shichigi migo chadanti tagdaji minduwas midang nawuda hag kundo changzen tegi chamalo ko soso dang o yeme ji gongudu diletes ji migo char khar duwas ta tene tele kya ma thar tanje ane rangi ningal yebe sabe tamyi inare ri inare hungi inare tidang dilya ane ji 갈소리 양체도 받대바나 시마임바 대다 랑스 모 예메도 제네 아니 미버때 세인도 랑스 모 예메도 제네 이게다 때사디 레라보 메두아스 알레타모 디팅도 제직도 내사디 레라보 메두아스 아니 디팅도 제직도 내베고 나라시메 때는 베 세인도 알레냐 동시 추쟁 롤샤야라 레라보 메두아스 다동 대외 꺄스 다 도저 상마 숙쟁이 취지래 르쥐베 이날 뭐네 이날 숙쟁이 취지래 근데 인자 속다지 도스 수수 쇠네 엔텔야미고 때하르지래 다 셈기 동시 취진 셈시아네 아니 델레야미고 째지도 내사데 세점 릭점 생긴데 숙제만 인상 알레도 뭐 동시 최전 코나 롤로 뭐 숭야디 하장기 깔래 가보여 되지 왜 설사디 sem기 내주지를 봤어 녜라 셈 타라 마체베체 세점 릭점 생긴지 딘데지기 다 넘버 쉐버스 남에도 딘데지 롤로 뭐 숭아체 등 숭차베잖아 딩이래 야미가 제직도 내네 아니 지다 곰토기 신행 띵인지 장야지 디토달라 디 아니 미가 디띵도 셈 미가 제직도 내바지 중앙 점기 미츠마 딩이란 심해봐 땡란 베베 고네 아니 곰토네 따와 쳐와스 딘데지 단다 먼저 차전 조전 생에도 망보지 곰토네 따와 쳐 도스전 루어와스 근데 인도 알레 당고 동시 조정 코란 거 토네 아니 차루 아니 곰 야야 카루 러기야 되지다 디토네 아니 미고 신도 타와 디토네 디곰 인도 아니 디네라 때네 아니 지다 말한 저기 다도 좀 단지나레 딘지나레 딘데지기 아니 지 미튼조 좀발라야 누가 쳐루줘야지 여대봐 지점게 시에바 타루 침바 디기 유동반이 nghệ 소나 디최지기 아니 친줄로 또번 가야라 나제 톱송 인나 참여바기 또번 가야라 아니 누가 쳐야 돼봐 딘데르데도 와스 딘데 인도 도초 장배 찾아 첨부 대점 마침바 아니 나초기 찾아 첨부 생인지 딱 공고를 했어야지 내가 대를 두유에 소시도 와스 듣고도 소소 냠냠을 자네 안 도시 durna 거지 다 대로 거주지 두서야지 예배를 좀 믿고 했어
Now, Rinpoche says he likes to go off topic. He would like to go topic a little bit in the sense that, well, so far, Rinpoche has talked about bodhicitta, the mind realizing emptiness. I've been mentioning emptiness a lot, but Rinpoche hasn't really talked about the basis of emptiness. I mean, empty of something. That's something. There's so many different bases based on which we can understand that phenomena don't exist in a certain way. So take, for instance, an object such as the table, something that's right in front of you, like the table. Well, we always need a basis. We always need something based on which we can then understand that it doesn't exist in and of itself and so forth. But if you just take a table, that is a coarse object. That's not hard to understand. So we take an object such as the table right in front of us, and then we search for it. Where is the table? What does it make a table? What is it that makes it a table? And we come to understand it doesn't exist in and of itself, and it's merely labeled. Now that is not that difficult. However, if then you take another object, so for instance, in the King of Concentration Sutra, what is described is the development of calm abiding, concentration, based on which you then come to understand emptiness and so forth. So, but what is the object? What you focus on first, it is not an object right in front of you, but it's a Buddha's body. Visualize the body of a Buddha. Visualize this kind of being, this being right in front of you, and then focus on that. Now, that is not easy. That's not easy to do. It's not like you just look at the table and think about it. No, now you need to visualize. You need to make the effort to visualize this Buddha, this body in front of you, this Buddha in front of you. But then that is still a sutric practice. If then you take into consideration the tantric aspect, in that case, you also take the body, excuse me, you also take the body of the Buddha. That's your object. But this time, it's not like a body that you, or a Buddha figure, a Buddha that's outside of yourself, as in the sutric system where you visualize the Buddha in the space in front of you. No, now you visualize you yourself are this Buddha figure. You yourself are this deity or Buddha figure. So it's like the Buddha is inside you. which is not the same. You're inseparable from this Buddha figure, and you focus on that. That is not the same as having the Buddha right in front of you. So you then visualize the different parts of the body, the face, the limbs, and so forth. So in that way, you focus. It's not easy to hold the object, focus on the object, and take into consideration all these different parts and focus individually on them. So it's all a part of you because it's inseparably linked to you. So that is already much more difficult, this kind of tantric practice. But you can go even more subtly. You can practice in a way that is even more subtle, more difficult to do. So instead of visualizing yourself to be this Buddha figure, this kind of meditative deity, instead you visualize a seed syllable. The seed syllable that is symbolic for the different Buddha figures. So whether it's Tam or Shri or Hum, doesn't matter. You visualize that you yourself, you visualize this syllable, and that you're inseparable from this syllable, from this what's called the seed syllable. You focus on that again, single-pointedly. That is not easy. It's not something outside of yourself. It's not as big as like a Buddha figure that you yourself arise as, but instead you're this tiny seed syllable. You're inseparably linked, or you're inseparable from this tiny seed syllable that has the essence of this particular Buddha figure. And then once you're able to focus on it, you then meditate on its emptiness. So it's not easy for the object to appear. This is all difficult. But if you think about it, well, it's still something physical, whether it is the table or whether it's the Buddha outside of yourself or the Buddha figure you arise as, or even the seed syllable. It's something physical. It's something that has a shape, that has possibly a color. That is actually not that difficult. But now if you let go of all of this, all physical objects, and instead focus on the mind, that is even more difficult. It's so difficult to identify the mind. What is consciousness? What is the mind? It's clear and knowing. We say it's clear and knowing. Oh, what does that actually refer to? What does that actually mean? So it's really difficult for us to focus on the mind. It's a very difficult basis. We say usually the mind is merely lucid. The mind is merely clear. It's merely clear. It's merely knowing. It's merely aware. So clarity and awareness, those are the two aspects of the mind. But it's very hard for us to identify them. And then, well, once we've identified the mind, to then concentrate on it. So applying what's called calm abiding or shamatha, applying shamatha on applying shamatha in the sense of single-pointedly focusing on this object. That is so difficult because it's so hard to identify it. And once we're able to do that, then we understand, we start to reflect on its ultimate nature, its lack of inherent existence. So this is what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is on the basis of meditation. Having meditated first, we then seek the view. This is how it's explained in the text. So on the basis of meditating here means single-pointedly meditating with concentration. You meditate on the object, and once you are able to hold it through your meditation, then you focus on its ultimate nature. So this is done also in Dzogchen and so forth. So all this is done in the different tantric traditions of Tibet. And it gets more and more difficult. You can tell it gets more and more difficult. So here when we talk about Mahamudra, it's the sutric aspect, it's not easy, it's difficult because you move away from something physical and instead now your basis is something non-physical. It is the mind itself. And it's on that basis, so just taking into consideration the sutric aspect of Mahamudra, focusing on the mind, well, it's the coarse mind. It is the mind that grasps at a self, for instance, and so forth. So focusing on the mind and then analyzing its ultimate nature. and as an antidote to the mind that grasps an inherent existence. That is much more effective doing that. Sorry.
semji kunzobe sem sengen de sezam rigzam de kande chimba thongmar til tan ben an ti ting ne ane ji migbal zeji de nebe shine gomdang kor ta shine gomdang ko 단다 차젠 티난다 하자 야첨부 개민도 왔어 다 가리용고 예방아봉 누제게 이제 두 셈네베 탑구사야지 아니 지수 참박 건배 운탄 남제다 아니 도디겐다 두존에 마숭샤베기 아니 신내 두당게름바 어떻게디 다 람린 치중나래 예데버티 수 릭잘라네 티강 춘남에 갑제 알레동 셈코라 세점 릭점 등 모시버제네 티강래야 아니 지 친구기 견다 타베 고네 아니 미발 제치도 네베 띵인지 아니 루탑치야 디 개첨부 임바레스 어디레마도 지 두소강가 띵인지 루탑기 셈네 루탑 거티기 참마 유샤네 람사 아니 셈라시메 지고 스타이지 용사 마레스 다 와나 띵인진 텔 셈텔가 아니 친구기 견다 타베기 아니 지원에라는 슝기 시주도 통바지기 미발 제주도 내버지 충분히나 되게 디버르베슬라나 되게 디투기 요사 마르스 다닝에망에 룽된 제베이마스 너 띵인진기 잡이 칙칙 두와스 등문에 다는 아람설레 식딩 쇼로가 니마도 mendote 개첨부 쇼지 두와스 제르무체기 빼제나라 야야한테 룽된 나두와스 지대한 다네 띵진 곰체야 대네 다도 두시 지미체 사주기네 띵진 곰바시 대네 녀모 치신 라야 추이나 지레 당에 지만 치신 란데 로마송 점물린 디나나레 띵진 곰년 시라요르스 이 되기 아니 띵진 미발 제주되네 띵진 곰바 되게 토네 아니 녀모 매바 채투로 대 지금 알았어 아니 깬질 때네 야 녀모들 양교 야츠 바자 세제 안 툭대버지 용구여래 베르나 학주 생인디 아니 학주긴 띵진 공부시 쓴 대표전 승구도 왔어 디쇼로가 세직도 내비 신내 찍고기 나야 요 말았어 그 고그럽에서나 고그래 디침바 제제 아니 디간이야 아니 뚱이 똥바니다 자베가 항통 마곰발 득답 요 말았어 자 어디직직 그러나 디쇼디 쇼르가 찍이요래 가테 쳐라다 소소 대다가데 곰체나 아니 다디기 녀물라르기 미게 쳐전친 방그레 송아지요래 도스레 가테 쳐 다음에 소소도 별로 디 곰베 고네 아니 녀몬티 파메베 치체베나 라르게 무로 쳐전도 찍을 근데 인도 세지도 네베 신내데다 똥바니기 아니 닐루르베 항동이 숭득고 그래 사지 어디 너띵이 잡아갈 숭바래 어떤데 인도 냐나 셈라미베 신내도 곰 군조베 냠렌티체 되네 셈기 닐루 모테베 고네 따와티고 어디 고기여베 너띵이 잡아 치티기 토네 단 로고야래
Continue with what she said previously. I'll continue to translate that. Now, first of all, with regard to, therefore, the mind, focusing on the mind is more difficult to first focus on it and then understand its ultimate nature. And once you've done that on the sutric level, then you apply the tantric level. So you, what you do is now you try to manifest the subtlest type of mind by stopping that, is dissolving the mind of white appearance, of red increase, as well as of black near attainment, these coarser levels of mind, until you manifest the subtlest clear light mind. And again, here you generate calm abiding, like a single pointed kind of concentration. You focus on that mind, and then you realize its ultimate nature. So it becomes even more difficult on the tantric level. That was what Rinpoche said previously. And now this time he said, well, anyway, the text, when you look at the Gelug Mahamudra text that Rinpoche will teach here, it talks of generating calm abiding. So it focuses on the conventional aspect of the practice, which is just identifying the mind, it's clear and knowing. And based on that, once you've identified this mere clarity, mere awareness, you then focus on that. And if you're able, once you're able to focus on this clarity of the mind, well, then you start to meditate on its ultimate nature, its ultimate reality. You focus on that. So you have these two stages described in the text. So in other words, yeah, so single-pointed shamatha, you develop that, understand the clarity, the awareness of the mind. And that is not very extensively explained. It's not explained in great detail. So, for instance, you make an effort to avoid the 5 folds. You apply the 6 or 8 and so forth, different compounded practices, etc. So there are different ways that are usually described. For instance, in Maitreya's distinguishing the two distinguishing the extremes of the middle, as well as the ornament of the Mahayana sutras. In there, Maitreya explains this more extensively, the methods, the means to develop that kind of calm abiding. And of course, then that's taken up in the Lamrim texts, in the different texts or the different treatises on the stages to the path of enlightenment, which again, they talk about the mind being mere clarity, mere awareness, mere knowing. And once you've understood that, you then focus on the mind or any other object and avoid the two extremes to meditative concentration and eventually shamatha, which are excitement and laxity. So if you don't do that, unless you focus or you practice first calm abiding or shamatha, that is train the mind in being single-pointedly focusing on a particular object, well, unless you do that first, it's very difficult to then understand the emptiness. It seems it's almost not possible to understand the emptiness of the mind without first concentrating, in this case, the mind, or in any other object. It's always easier first to generate calm abiding or shamatha with regard to this object, and then focus on its ultimate nature. But anyway, the point is here to practice in such a way that you avoid the two obstacles to shamatha or calm abiding, which are excitement and laxity. But that is not enough. This is also something explained in the King of Concentration Sutra, which Lama Tsongkhapa quotes again and again. So in there it is said that if you only practice shamatha, if you only practice calm abiding without focusing on emptiness, without reflecting on emptiness, without meditating on emptiness, well, the afflictive emotions will only temporarily disappear. However, they will return again and again. And there are many examples of great meditators. There are many beings who meditate only on shamatha, only on calm abiding. However, they're not able to eliminate their afflictive emotions for good. In other words, for some time, they may grow weaker, they may disappear for some time, but eventually the imprints that were left on our mind, the imprints that were left by these afflictive emotions, they will start ripening again. And once again, these different afflictive emotions, they will arise again. Therefore, it's not enough. It's not enough to only practice calm abiding. It's important to bring together calm abiding with the special insight. So this union of calm abiding and special insight, that is important. Otherwise, you won't be able to eliminate your afflictive emotions for good. Which is why Rinpoche said, well, this particular quote that Lama Tsongkhapa gives again and again about practicing calm abiding not being enough, practicing it, meditating on it, not being enough in that, although your mind is very focused, but you're unable to irrevocably eliminate the afflictive emotions. So after he said that, after that was said in the King of Concentration Sutra, the text goes on to say, you need to realize emptiness, so to realize selflessness. And once you realize selflessness and you meditate on selflessness, then you can eliminate the afflictive emotions in such a way that they will never return. They will irrevocably eliminate the afflictive emotions. Therefore, both are important. These two, calm abiding, the single-pointed mind of shamatha, together with the understanding of emptiness in the form of special insight. Which is why this particular text here, the Mahamudra text, explains exactly those two aspects. So the sutric aspect of Mahamudra being extensively explained in this text, it explains first the conventional aspect of the mind and the conventional practice, the practice as opposed to the ultimate practice, the conventional nature of the practice, which is calm abiding. And then once that is done, once that is clearly established that this is what you need to recognize, this is the basis of meditation, this is the basis, the mere clarity, the mere awareness. So that conventional aspect, once you've done that, then comes the ultimate aspect.
유신 강의 때는 시민주스 차소 녀모티 돈이 또베 로이 또지 아니 좀 그러마도 신 강의장 좀 두고 말했어 유신 강의 때는 시민주스네 다 샘기 등내 이날에 조전 강의 등내 이날 돈이 또베 따와 고고여버데 되네 세고도 왔어 다팅에 우주 잡가 유산 가르스나 나 착전 공부요 나 조천 공부요 제제 세점 릭점 샘디 입다 가도 가야면도 다 텐데지 세점 릭점티 네 미고 짠제 디탄데 나 차전 공부이 나 조천 공부이 세벨라이나 디 동시 최전 공부 군조배 차도 공부를 마도 지기 디딩 닐루드 공부 멤버지 닐루드 공부고 여버디 단데 노팅이 야베 치티기 세부시부치 주신 강인되는 시민주스 샘기딩네 공부이네 샘기 닐루 공부를 마도 지기 디마제 차소 녀무 시도 말았어. 아니 유차전 틸코레 나리네 차네 동배 차 찬스 무다라스 마하무다라스 디인두 알랭엘 마하트 말아버체 무다라시베 무세야데 가르레 동니도베 이시드레스타 셈티체 동니도베 셈티체 무 드라사데 가르스나 코르웨 찬도메 야누 코베 츄르토스 야사데 드라사드와 드라사데 코베 츄르토베 랑시메베 동바니티체 디인두 유 동바니다 유젠 이시니티 야네 냠도야 예데베체 첨보 송두 주보 세인두 디강들이야 아니 돈이 또베 이시 유 동바니라 출라 추샤시 대자마임바 yapden들이야 아니 신도 타베 왜세기 셈디기 장주성 yapden지 탑 장주성 yapden지 탑시 송리지 돈이 인정이 못jen지 거기 여다바디 첨보 송두 주보 사데 마사데 어떻스테네 내가 코레 돈이 있나야 셈 찍고 곰바 찍고 당김에 봐도 직 대가란 게 마하무드라서 직 대가란 게 세부 땡기도 와 어디다 직 개야데 개첨부래 다 텐드레지기 토네 근데 리우 근데부터 붙을 차샤바 있나야 숭주 노르불 팅와스 다 중초 담만반자 얍세스 다 제르무치기 시싱무스 총 차쟁게 담바다 제수 담바 자와 엔사바나 마두스규 달라테네 세텔레 숭주 녀데바티 찍자마이마 니자마이마 테네마 방한드제 예데바지 차쟁 냠랭게 토네 아니 도제 숭주 림바신도 총데바지 숭주 노불 팅와스네 숭야데야 내가 어딘데지 건배 토네레 딘데 인도 만주 다랭기 롭첸 디나려야 차첸 세야 디기 내가 놀람라 자네 장주고 있습니다 동반이 나람라 자네 셈디 타르타르다네 타르 차이 신도 차베 셈지기 유동반이에 대야 대다 냐바자 가서 또 동반일을 추셔신도 찍고 지금 많이 봐. 뒤 캡tain 때려야 지다 길루 초네 밖에서 지기 터는 파시에베나 내가 준비 이시 딘데지기 송도 주베 터네 아니 로고레스 깨져 딘데지 마다 다 드린 깨져 대파도 누래
림보체디 다디 양가 저식윤도 와이나
아
무드라 드라데스
드라사티 아니 랑신 동반이들 고고래 무사티 동유도 이시들에 차는 동배 이시대스 야는 코벨 처를 들어서는 야생인데 유동반이들 코벨 처를 들어가지 통말 군두성고 바르도 군두성고 타마 군두성고 되잖아 랑원을 주베 동바들에지 드라사티
So with regard to this quote, therefore, I mean, it's important from which he repeated this quote again from the Sutra of the King of Concentration. So it's so important, he says, that we don't stop there. We shouldn't stop there to just focus on the mind, in this case of Mahamudra. So to just focus on the mind, but we should, as it's said here, first understand the actual nature, the final nature of the object, then meditate on that in order, therefore, to eliminate the afflictive emotions. Because it goes on to say, because otherwise you will not attain nirvana, since there is no other cause, there is no other method, in other words, other than realizing emptiness. There's no other method to then come to eliminate that, is to overcome the afflictive emotions and attain liberation. And of course, it doesn't matter which object you choose, which kind of basis you choose for your understanding of emptiness. However, if you choose the object of the mind, being the mind, in particular in the context of Mahamudra, it's important to understand, like, if you feel like I'm practicing Mahamudra, I'm practicing Dzogchen, you may be saying that, but if all you do is just focus on the mind, that's not a complete practice of either Dzogchen or Mahamudra. I mean, if you just focus on the mind, which doesn't have shape nor color, so it's got no shape, no color, well, you come to understand its aspects of clarity, and awareness. However, well, that is not the complete practice of Mahamudra or Dzogchen, in the sense that you've neglected its emptiness. You need to have the understanding of emptiness. You need to combine it with the understanding of the ultimate nature of the mind. Otherwise, it's a totally incomplete practice, and it doesn't qualify to be called Mahamudra, for instance. You won't be able to remove the afflictive emotions. And that becomes obvious just from the name Mahamudra. So when we hear the words Mahamudra, in Tibetan, or as it's in Sanskrit called Mahamudra, with a great seal. So in particular, when we take, for instance, the two syllables, mu and da. So what does mu refer to? It refers to the mind that realizes emptiness. That is the mu. It is the subject. It's that which realizes. It's called the subject, or that which has an object. It's the mind that realizes emptiness. And then you've got the da, the second syllable in the Sanskrit. So in the Sanskrit, mu is the first syllable, da is the second syllable. That refers to the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena of samsara, of phenomena of nirvana. None of these phenomena existing inherently from their own side. So that describes the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence. Therefore, you need both. You need to have the mind, focus on the mind, which is the mu, single-pointedly focus on it, but also understand its ultimate nature, da, just expressed by the syllable da. And then if you add the maha in order to express the union. So what is this union? It's united with, it's brought together. So the mind realizing emptiness, which is the mudra. If now the maha, well, in the sutric system, it is bodhicitta. You bring it together with the mind of enlightenment. In the tantric system, you have the extremely subtle mind, which is the clear light mind. So you combine, you bring, in other words, the mind that realizes emptiness is that very subtle mind. That is the meaning of maha in the tantric system, but in the sutric system, it is bodhicitta. Therefore, it's very clear that what you need to do, if you practice Mahamudra, for instance, it's not enough to just focus on the clear and knowing aspect or the clear and aware aspect of the mind, but instead you need to also focus on the emptiness. Don't stop short there. Don't just focus on the mind, but you need to know that you need both aspects. Therefore, it is said time and again in the text that this Mahamudra, the words Mahamudra, they express the conventional aspect. You have the conventional aspect, which focuses on calm abiding, which is the conventional aspect of the practice, which is calm abiding, and you have the ultimate aspect of it, of this practice, the ultimate aspect being the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of the mind. And Lama Tsongkhapa himself, he's mentioned this again and again, the jewel of the union, the jewel of the union. So basically, he learned about this. He learned about these different practices, and so they were passed down to the author of this text via Gyalpa Ensapa and so forth. So these are the great masters who learned from the way it was set forth, the way Mahamudra was set forth. And Lama Tsongkhapa didn't just talk about it one time, he talked about it time and again. This union, the union, the different types of union here from the point of view of bodhicitta and the mind realizing emptiness, the union of the clear light mind and the subtle winds, the union of the mind realizing emptiness, manifesting it in the form of a very subtle mind. So there are different ways in which to describe what is called the jewel of the union. So it's kind of like a jewel garland, because there are all these different unions that you all need to practice one after the other. Anyway, having said all this, therefore, practice of the Great Seal, or the practice of Mahamudra, it has both aspects. It has the sutric aspect and it has the tantric aspect. The sutric aspect being this mind realizing emptiness, first generating calm abiding, and then based on that realizing emptiness, which is combined with bodhicitta. And then you have, as mentioned before, you have the tantric aspect. Therefore, the tantric aspect, again, also having a union here, or referring to a particular union, you then have the extremely subtle mind. The extremely subtle mind that meditates on emptiness, and it's therefore the mind realizing emptiness is unified, is brought together with this subtle mind. And on the basis of that, you then bring and so based and what you add to this, according to the Giluk system, is also the great bliss. Great bliss is combined with this very subtle mind realizing emptiness, and that leads to the result of Buddhahood. Anyway, Rinpoche says, well, that this was my explanation. This completes the explanation I wanted to give today. I wanted to connect to what I said last year. So to create this connection, that you understand where we left off last year and where I'll continue from this year. So I felt it was important to give you that kind of explanation. So if you've got some prayers prepared, you could recite the prayers. If not, then let's leave it at that. We'll this The teachings are completed for today and we'll continue tomorrow.
חוברת שלי, ואנחנו